we graduated high school in summer of 2001, in May of 2001. And then by November of 2001 is when we actually signed the record contract with Tooth and Nail Records. So we signed with them officially in November of 2001, which was, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 6 months after we graduated high school.
Welcome to Church Jams Now, the podcast where three former youth group kids and current music nerds deep dive into Christian music from the 90s and 2000s. I, of course, am your co-host, Kylan Savage. With me, as always, is Mr. TJ Smith.
Hey, man. I'm sorry to say I'm a little under the weather today, and I got to tell you, all the old medicines that I've been taking,
everyone is shaking their head. Literally.
They're not working. Okay, but I really am sick. So
yeah,
it's not
I know you
just
are
a bit.
You are sick.
Like I am legitimately sweaty because I've had the flu. This bit is sweaty, but I am also sweaty. I was wondering if you had any new medicines for me, buddy.
We might. We also have beautiful producer Josh.
I'm here, and I was wondering what TJ was going to do with that.
Me too.
Yeah.
But we also have Brandon Rike and Zach Miles from Dead Poetic to talk about the album. How are you gentlemen this evening?
Really good. Thanks for having us.
Very good.
Awesome. We are so stoked you're here. We have started recently doing these artist episodes. So we started doing interviews a few years ago. Then it kind of clicked for us that our whole show is going track by track on these albums. And something happened at a certain point where we were like, well, let's just ask the people that were on the album, like rather than just us talking
That's
about
way
it.
cooler than us talking about them. Yeah.
Exactly. So I am so excited that you guys are here to talk about this album with us.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was an amazing experience in our life, and I don't know that we've ever gotten really deep and granular into it. So it's crazy to think it's been 20 years. So we're down to dig into it and try to remember what in the world we were doing 20 years ago and see if we can give you details about each thing.
It's crazy. I mean, being in a band is just so weird because it feels like it was yesterday. And at the same time, it's been 20 years and you're like, how in the world has that much time passed since we did this? Because it's just such a monumental part of your life that you just, you can't believe how long, ago it was.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it never goes away. And then you do the math and then you realize, 2024, 2004. And it's mind blowing, earlier I was talking about, midlife crisis type of stuff. And it's really, understanding it now, it's like, it's just math is what it is. Midlife crisis is math. As you wake up in the morning and you do math and you're like, you mean to tell me I'm 41 years old now? And it's just such a, and then you think of all these amazing experiences, but kind of what Zach was saying is like, we still have relationships with all those bands. We still have relationships with the bandmates. Zach and I still have a relationship. Like that never went away and it's always there. And we just technically haven't been a band for 18, 20 years now. So it's a trip.
Yeah, It's wild. So a big thing that I like to start with on this show, since our show is very specifically about quote unquote Christian music from the 90s and 2000s, I always like to ask people their origin stories. And it's always really fun when we have people that were involved in these bands that are part of a lot of our other guests' origin stories, So I want to ask both of y'all, what kind of music did you grow up listening to? And then how did you kind of get involved in the Christian music scene to an extent? So I also would love to know the first CD that either of y'all bought.
Or
you want to take that one, Zach?
Or cassette.
I'll try to make a quick answer. We'll go back and forth. Oh, well, yeah, it's cassettes for sure. I mean, we were
right.
We both had older brothers. Our older brothers were my older brother's just a little bit older than Zach's older brother. They were different grades. So like,
what an advantage.
Essentially when my brother was a senior, Zach's brother was a junior, and then me and Zach were freshmen, to give you the age gap.
Nice.
But we obviously grew up in the 90s, which was a freaking amazing time to grow up. And, Zach and I, we lived in the same small town. Me and Zach have been friends since second grade. And I think we bonded in a special art class back in second grade. Yeah. So we just connected. Zach and I just connected really well. I think art and drawing was such a cool thing because it allowed us to have identity outside of whatever social identity was needed in school. You're like, we both like to draw. Is it cool to draw? Right. And it was just a fun thing to like bond over. So we didn't necessarily bond over music. That wasn't what brought us together, initially, but like, second grade, you're pretty galvanized together. And then you just kind of go through childhood together, and our interests were very alike. I was thinking the other day, like, Crisscross Totally Crossed Out has got to be like one of the greatest albums of all time. So like that was what we had MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, Crisscross, Another Bad Creation, all that stuff that we were into. And then by the time we were, 12, 13 years old, grunge was happening, and freaking Green Day Dookie came out, and Weezer Blue came out, and, Nirvana and Bush 16 Stone, and all these great albums came out. And what comes to mind, and also the movie Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes.
Right.
And if you were in that time, you know how colorful and vibrant all of that stuff was.
Yeah.
So like, Zach and I just obsessed over that stuff, and freaking GT bikes and all of that stuff. And then Zach was a much better skateboarder than I was. But like Alien Workshop and skate decks and CCS catalogs, like that was kind of this amazing culture. Reebok pumps, by the way. All of this stuff was just so much great nostalgia for us. And it was like, I'm sure every kid and every generation feels like they've got an abundance of stuff, but man, growing up in the mid 90s was, it was so vibrant and so amazing. We had this wonderful little small town that was small enough that you could ride your bike from one end and to the other end. And really, when Zach and I grew up, he was on the west side of town and I was on the east side of town. That was really just like a, not even a 10-minute bike ride back then. So I just think we got really lucky with that.
The picture that you're painting of y'all's childhood relationships is like a Stephen King novel without the trauma. Like you guys, like
that was our town. I mean,
man,
it wasn't even a town; it's a village. I think when we lived in it, it was around probably 5,200.
Yeah, now it's 4,300. I just checked the other day.
Went down.
Went down. So it's less. It's even less than it was. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah,
but we grew up in a town called New Lebanon, Ohio, and we were saying Stephen King, but Steven Spielberg directed the movie Super 8. And what's funny about that is they replaced it. There's a scene where there's a map, and they took away the word New Lebanon and put the town Lillian. Lillian is the town that whole, anyway.
No way.
The topography of the place, it's way too hilly. We lived in a very flat place, but it is interesting to be like, yeah, we grew up there, and they actually put that there. So I think
crazy
cornfields everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just surrounded by them.
Some corn-fed American rockers.
But go ahead, Zach. I just kind of like, took over that one. But like, what's your interpretation of how we grew up?
Well, I mean, as far as like with music and stuff, I mean, the first stuff I can remember getting into was Belle Biv DeVoe, Vanilla Ice.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went and saw MC Hammer live when I probably had to be 10 or something like that.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
And then got into a bunch of hip hop around 5th, 6th grade, like listening to Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, all that stuff that was out at that time. And then
that Chronic tape. The tape.
Oh, dude, my mom caught me listening to that, dude. And it. But anyways, I was blessed with a dad that absolutely loved rock and roll. He took me to see Poison when I was 6.
Whoa.
It was my very first concert because I loved CC DeVille.
You're so cool.
It was
He
crazy.
was pretty cool, man. Zach's dad was the coolest dude in the town, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, no
He
kidding.
just loved rock and roll too. So when I started getting into rock and roll, he was just like, "Oh man, yeah, I'm taking you to anything and everything that you ever want to go to." I'm proud to say that I was one of the few that saw. I was 13 years old and we went and saw Marilyn Manson.
Whoa.
Yeah, like back when he was scary, and my entire
for sure.
They thought I was.
Smells like children era, right?
Yeah, it was Antichrist Superstar, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right after that, when he was just blowing up and everyone was like terrified of him. Everyone told me I was going to get gassed at the show as he was killing entire crowds. But my dad never took rock and roll seriously. He was just like, Marilyn Manson's doing exactly what Alice Cooper did back in the day.
Right.
Just fun, It's like, even though it's pretty dark, but so yeah, like Brandon said, just monumental albums as far as like when me and him started really getting into rock and roll. It was like, of course, Nirvana comes out on MTV, but even more than that for us, it was definitely more the Weezer Blue album and Dookie. I had a gigantic Dookie poster on my wall. And we would just sit there for hours looking at it, trying to figure out.
It was tall like a poster. So it would be the cassette crop where Dookie would be in the middle, where the CD is just the square. But if you see the tall version, you get like way more stuff, which is, we just like looked at it for hours.
We look at it forever and find different things going on.
It's like a Where's Waldo?
Totally.
Yeah. It's
happening.
so fun to listen, watch. I'm sorry. So that's when me and Brandon started, and the other guys, Chad and Josh in the band. That's when we really started getting into rock and roll, and I started getting into showing interest in the guitar. Like the Weezer, the Weezer Blue album was probably one of the biggest reasons that I even wanted to buy a guitar. So that was kind of the turning point, and then I just left all the hip hop stuff behind, and I was just like, nope, rock and roll now. Alternative.
Started going to the thrift store and we started buying button up shirts like Weezer had on the blue cover and like wearing stuff like Nirvana and I just started dressing like them. So that was a kind of a cool part, like just growing. I look back on that for me personally where, like my family didn't have much money growing up. So it was this, I would get hand-me-downs from my brother. I remember just like, I would never have any name brand stuff unless it was like maybe a hand-me-down after we got, after my brother would be done with his Nike t-shirt or something. Right. But by the time like most people would really care and would really affect them, we had now shifted to this alternative grunge thing, and it didn't matter anymore because I was going to be wearing bowling shoes and crazy Hawaiian shirts or whatever we were doing at the time. And so it was like the band helped me, my friendship with Zach and the band and all of that stuff kind of helped me stop chasing whatever that fit in thing was that is just natural when you're a kid. So that's age 12, 13, where it's just like, hey, I don't care about fitting in anymore because me and my friends are doing something cooler than anyone else is doing. And it was such a blessing looking back to realizing like, that's where you stopped caring about conformity. That's when you stopped trying to go with the flow. And that's when maybe I built confidence in who I was. If I was into art, if I was into music, whatever it was that I was into, that was enough. And that was cooler than what anyone else was doing.
Right.
So that was just a pretty monumental moment in our lives, in my life personally.
Yeah. As someone who also kind of experienced that, like it can't be understated how big that is in someone that's like ostensibly like a little bit of a weirdo to get their identity from like being the guy in a band in like middle school,
which
high
is so
school.
off the
like
wall. We actually had this other friend who was like an amazing BMX racer. And like, we just like, do you remember when Randy would show us those pictures? Like he was, we had a friend named Randy Stamper and he had like a magazine. He was on the cover of this BMX magazine. It's like, what are you doing? It's like someone who has like a black belt in karate, but it's not from your school, it's not like, it's not a school sport, so you don't really know what they're doing. It's just this like alternate route that it just proves to be so amazing. And like I can't even think about what kids have to deal with now as far as like judgment from social media. We also, all that to say, like we had such a small school. Everyone in our school was pretty cool. Even the jerks were just, whatever, harmless. So it wasn't that, I mean, we had such a small school, like our graduating class had like 70 something kids in it. So it was very small, and everybody knew everybody, and the jocks and the nerds and the whatever, they all kind of knew each other. So it wasn't this very exclusive, like high school that you see in the movies. Like we all pretty much got along. So that was great. But going on to your original question, around this time, one of our other friends, Chad, so me, Chad, and Zach are all in the same grade. Chad has an older brother named Josh. Around this time, Chad had kind of convinced us to start going to his youth group at his church. And, at this point, we're 13 years old, and there's pretty girls over at his church youth group. So what the heck? One of the, there's a couple guys that play in bands. So like we could go to this youth group and see a guy playing guitar, a guy playing drums, whatever. And those people were cool enough, and the youth pastor was cool enough. So we started getting involved there, and we started going regularly. And around this time, Chad was really witnessing to us is what he was doing, or at least he was doing what he was told, his youth group told him to do or whatever it was. But he showed us this stack of CDs and the bands MXPX, Value Pack, Goaty Hook, maybe Plank Eye. But I noticed those 3 albums had this little logo on the back called Tooth and Nail. And I had no idea what Tooth and Nail was. I just noticed that this logo was on the back of all 3 of these. And it was also an introduction to this punk rock that like we hadn't really heard other than like Less Than Jake or I don't know. I don't know any of that punk rock flavor. I don't know that we were really listening to Blink-182 at that time yet, because Green Day definitely had a different type of punk rock. It wasn't that, boom, cat, boom, cat, boom, cat. It wasn't that type of punk rock.
Not so angsty.
Right. It was a little grungier punk rock, I guess you could say. So it was this introduction to this really bright MXPX Value Pack, Goaty Hook stuff that it was cool. Like we couldn't deny that those records were awesome. Little did we know that we would have more to do with Tooth and Nail than we thought.
That's crazy.
I think that was the first time that I actually heard any bands play like that double time punk.
Yeah.
Beat on the drums where you're just like, how are they playing that fast? Because Green Day never did that.
Right.
But, you get like Slick Shoes, you like throw on Slick
Shoes, dude.
Just going at it, and you're just like, dude, this is insane. So that was like a whole different type of punk rock. We were listening to Goaty Hook, Slick Shoes, MXPX, Dogwood.
Oh, Dogwood.
Yeah. So, Yuri is a machine on the drums for MXPX. He just
it's just like you don't even know how to do it. It was like blowing my minds.
Yeah.
And I actually just heard a podcast with Travis Barker and on the Rick Rubin's podcast, and he was talking about like Gorilla Biscuits brings him back to his childhood. I'm like, you know what? I've never heard Gorilla Biscuits. So I listened to him on Spotify. I was like, that was the flavor of punk rock that we were just introduced to with those bands that Zach just mentioned. It was like, that was something going on back then in the 90s, Gorilla Biscuits and all of those punk rock bands, but we just didn't know anything about them. And so we were tapping into that for the first time. And there's something so amazing underground. I want to say the word scene, but it's like there was no scene. We didn't have a scene. Like that whole world wasn't, we never really tapped into that, but like to this underground style of music that was different than what you were seeing on MTV, but so awesome and maybe even better than what you're seeing on MTV. It was really exciting because like grunge was great and everything that we were, consuming from grunge and alternative, all that stuff was amazing. And then there was this other flavor that we haven't had yet. And it was also amazing. And for whatever reason, that was sort of what that's where we leaned. And like, that's what, that's kind of stuff that interested us. And we started playing music in that way. Funny thing about the first time we practiced as a band. So I think me, Chad, and Zach did not a talent show, but I feel it was like a last day of school stupid song. You remember that comfy chair songs? That was that it? Was that what was that? Was it talent show or was it
original?
last day of school?
It was a talent show for marching band.
Oh, it was just the dumbest song. It was just the dumbest song or whatever, but it was a very primacy sounding song. And we just did it for fun. But that was the first time us three had even done anything like that. And we practiced at Chad's bedroom. But then since the youth group had a PA and a drum set and amps and stuff, we went up there and we were just going to mess around. But we were obviously 13 years old. So 12 years, well, I guess we were 13. And we didn't have our license. So Chad's older brother, Josh, drove us up there and Josh didn't want to drive back home. And so he just sat behind the drum set. And that's the first time us four played a song together or played whatever together. And that was the first time. What were we called back then? Don't even worry about it. We had such
No, we are worried about it. You got to let us know.
We are worried about it. You got to tell us.
I think it was Static at that point.
It was Static, and then it was Acerama. And
Acerama. The dumbest name.
Yeah. Dude, yeah. I love... I'm so enamored at this point in my life by like shitty high school band names.
Yeah.
Like I love it. It's my favorite.
We had, so we were a 4-piece and we called ourselves Static. I actually remember I heard a guy said one of the names of his cats was Static, and I suggested that was a cool name for a band. That was the first band name.
There you go.
I can't remember if we recorded a cassette 4 songs as Static. I don't think it was. I don't know.
Nothing as Static. It was a little 4-song EP under the name Acerama. And so
we got another guy in our band, and he gave us
Healing on High. I think it's
Healing on High. It had some real biblical meaning.
Sure.
And so we're like, okay, all right, cool, man. Cool. But this dude was like our Zach De La Rocha in town. And we brought him into our band. And he was magnetic back then, where it was just like, I don't know, he rapped and it was just really fun. So we brought him as a 5th member of the band. I'm probably really jumping over us as a 4-piece quite a bit there. But anyway, we played some shows there. But what was cool about our town and Dayton, Ohio in general, we're from outside Dayton, Ohio, by the way, we could just find a bunch of bands to play a show. We could really just find 4 or 5 bands and put a show together pretty easily. And our manager, our good friend Nathan, he was like, he would put all these shows together and just go through all that busy work of trying to organize the stuff. So it wasn't hard for us to, play shows and get in front of a lot of people, and it was a blast. But then that ran its course. And then we were back to a 4-piece. Weston was one of those dudes who if God told him to do this, he's out, and he moved on to the next thing. So then we were back to our 4-piece, and then so we pretty much went as that 4-piece, and I think we changed our name to Mindset at that time. And then Mindset was the kind of rap rock band that we did in high school for the most part, and that was a freaking blast because we had this wonderful little venue called Gathering Grounds in Dayton, Ohio. It was like a 200 cap room, and we could just sell it out, and that was like the most fun anyone could have in high school. And we were playing shows in front of 200 of our friends, sweating our butts off. Like it felt like our heads right up against the drop ceiling in that place or whatever. And that was a blast. And like around that time too is when you decide, are you going to continue playing soccer in high school? Or you continue playing basketball in high school? And we were all pretty good in sports and like we enjoyed it. But dude, the band playing shows on the weekends was so much cooler than playing games on the, so it was just amazing. We just had a total blast back then. And Mindset was just like, it was just a blast. Everybody loved it. We were having it was great.
So I want to ask then, where did Dead Poetic come from? Like after all this, like we've talked about quite a few,
because it was still the 4 of y'all, right? The whole time. Yeah, you just changed your names
constantly because I don't know, it was like as our genre, like our influences changed, and how our sound changed.
Right.
We were basically every single time we were like, well, we can't be the same band because we would just completely change.
Right.
I mean, we had Limp Bizkit and Rage Against the Machine super popular when we were 15, 16 years old.
Right.
And there wasn't anything cooler than that at the time. And like things have evolved enough now where Limp Bizkit's back and, we're appreciating new metal and all this stuff. But like, there was a time where it was embarrassing to say all that, but it's not embarrassing. We thought Limp Bizkit freaking ruled. Well, and we thought Rage ruled. And we, it was 311. We thought 311 ruled. So we just had a total blast doing it. But yeah, it was think about being a teenager and you're like identity crisis. Like, no, we're something else now. I'm rap rock or I'm emo or I'm whatever you are. We just evolved through all of it and we changed our name when we evolved.
We just started listening to hardcore. I think that was like the final stage of us was we just decided like we want to be part of this subculture.
Right.
So
guy Weston that was in our band. Sorry, Zach, I stepped on you.
No.
That guy Weston who was in our band came over to Zach's house and put the tape. He had a tape by a band named ZAO.
Oh,
and he puts it in. It's a cassette. I think we're in Zach's. It wasn't Zach's bedroom, but it's one of the bedrooms back there in Zach's house. What's a cat so strong? Freaking the Splitter Shards birth separation, and my mind was blown because I'd never heard screaming like that. We were talking about the halftime or the double time punk rock drum beat. Right. This screaming, I had never heard it before. And there was something so shiny about it, like vicious about it. It was like this texture that I had never even understood before. And I think that's when we decided to get heavier. That was an amazing moment, was when we heard that Zaya tape for the first time, Splinter Shards Burst Separation.
We decided to get heavier when we were Mindset. We were starting to get heavy as a band called Mindset, and then Dead Poetic was just the fun. I think honestly we changed the name from Mindset just because we were trying to stray away from that, put two words together to create a name that a lot of new metal bands were doing. We did
Taproot
wanted to get Taproot,
Downcome,
Lily, stuff like that. So we were just like, let's shed this name. Promise it's the last time. We promised. And we just wanted to come up with something that was a little bit, a little bit more original, but just better than what Mindset was.
Hey, Jammers, interrupting the show here to talk about our favorite sponsor ever, CollideRecords.com. For those of you that may not know, or if it's your first time listening to us, they have vinyl, CDs, all of your physical media needs that you might have, a lot of stuff that we actually cover on this show.
It's true. And what's even better is if you use our promo code.
We have a promo code.
You can get what percentage off?
20% off.
20?
20!
A whole 20%.
That's wild.
Josh, what's that promo code? Hit them with it.
Promo code is Church Jams Now, all one word, to get 20% off your first order at Collide Records. And I would recommend just going and checking out their new releases tab to see what they've recently got in stock, or check out their pre-orders as well. They've always got some new cool stuff coming in as well, in addition to looking up all your old favorites of super hard to find CDs or very awesome pressings of vinyl.
So fill out that back catalog, and do it a little on the cheap.
It's the way to go. So we'll say that one more time. CollideRecords.com, promo code ChurchJamsNow for 20% off your first purchase.
And let's get back to the show.
Thank you.
And I think 98, 99, we had started going. Chad had told us about Cornerstone Festival in Illinois. And then we went there, had a freaking blast, man. Being 16 years old and camping with your friends, like two states away. And then hearing all these bands that were on Tooth and Nail or whatever, watching a hardcore band, watching these punk rock bands, and just the culture of punk rock. And, like they had these gutter punks from Japuza in Chicago on the trash truck, and they had these, Elmer's glue freaking mohawks, and we hadn't seen anything. We're from a farm town in outside of Dayton, Ohio, and like the feel, when you're that age, everything is so like multi-sensory, and man, we were just getting all of it. Like I still know the way the freaking blacktop smelt, or the road smelled at Cornerstone and all that, but just again, we just got this taste, and also around this time we had our little Mindset 5-song EP, and we were handing that out to everyone we knew from Tooth and Nail Records. If we had any clue that they might be associated with Tooth and Nail Records, we did it. And I actually remember passing football with Brandon Ebel, the head of Tooth and Nail, and I handed him our CD. We were actually right by our campsite, and so anyway, it was like, that was in June or July, summer of 99, I think it was. Maybe 2000. I don't know. It's hard to remember.
Are you talking about when we were handing out our demo?
I think so. That'd be 2000, right?
Yeah, that had to be 2000.
So anyway, we got back, and then we got an email from Tooth and Nail Records a couple weeks after Cornerstone. And I think the subject line was "Hello Mindset." Then there was just that started the conversation. They wanted to know more about us. But it's 2000 and we're 17 years old. So I don't think they wanted to sign 18-year-olds, and we were close enough. So we just kept that conversation going for a while. So I know this episode's about new medicines. I'm trying to get there.
Hey, we're getting there. Yeah. We're getting there.
Okay. Yeah. The dates are obviously fuzzy, but we graduated high school in the summer of 2001, in May of 2001. We had our first tour couple weeks after we graduated high school, and we went from Ohio down to Florida and back up. So that would have been summer of 2001. And then by November of 2001 is when we actually signed the record contract with Tooth and Nail Records. So we signed with them officially in November of 2001, which was, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 6 months after we graduated high school.
Well, so you signed in November, and then you had Four Wall Blackmail come out in like June of 2002, right? So just signed, man. And then just
we went to record. Little Rock, Arkansas in January of 2002, because I think we went over my birthday then, and my birthday's in January. So yeah, man, Barry Pointer, Little Rock, Arkansas, recorded Four Wall Blackmail.
Man, not to mention that we basically got signed on a sound. We sounded nothing like what our demo sounded.
Yeah, you got signed as Mindset, and then you're like, we're Dead Poetic now.
And they wanted us as a rap core. They wanted us as a rap core band, and then we were just like,
wow.
Yeah, and we. I do think anymore. Based on our rap core, they said less screaming, more singing. That was their suggestion, based off the Mindset EP.
Don't forget that we did record a 2-song EP as Dead Poetic.
That's right, yeah.
That was officially kind of the demo that got us signed.
Locked it in. Gotcha.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, we spelled it DED Poetic. Don't know why. Linkin Park was
2001.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's why.
And you were
17, for some reason, 18. The songs were like almost 6 minutes a piece. Like I listen to it now, and I'm just like, why didn't we stop?
What?
Well,
we just kept going.
I mean, at that time, we had no idea what a producer even did. You know what I mean? We didn't know what a producer was, because in our mind, a producer was the guy at the recording studio who pressed record. So at that point, we had just kind of, every time we had recorded anything, we recorded with this guy, Rick May. Rest in peace, Rick May. But he lived in Chillicothe. We recorded that Mindset EP, and then that DED Poetic 2-song EP with Rick. So that was our first time, like, having our stuff really be recorded well. But Rick didn't really alter the format of our song in any way. We were pretty much able to record what we came in with for the most part.
And that 2-song demo was heavily, heavily, heavily influenced by White Pony by the Deftones. I was just like completely loving that album. And we were like, yeah, let's just do that now.
Dude, Deftones' White Pony was a seismic shift for us. Embodiment, the narrow scope of things, was a seismic shift. Going back a little bit to Zaya, Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest. Yeah, Liberate Ex Inferis was like, again, there's just something about, you think about, maybe I'm looking at it from a design perspective, but like to take this gritty hardcore sound and dress it in a polished aesthetic was something very enticing to us. And it made, there's the warmth of Blood and Fire because it literally has a guy on fire on the cover, versus the sharpness of Liberate, where it just had like red numbers on it, and it was, I don't know. And also like Tooth and Nail had Don and Ryan Clark in their art department, who are just like design gods. And it was just, Tooth and Nail was just at their prime at that point in time. And it was so amazing to be able to work with Tooth and Nail because it just felt like everything was going to get elevated. So I don't know. I went off on a tangent, but we were just getting fed so much amazing stuff from Embodiment to Deftones, to everything that was going on around, turn of the century there, 2000.
Yeah.
It's an incredible time.
It really was.
And not to mention our freaking label mates, like Ludacris, like,
right.
If you weren't there for Ludacris, Norma Jean was amazing. When that Bless the Martyr album came out, Norma Jean was amazing. But the Ludacris Seahorse Throwing Myself record, it had all that Deftones flavor in it. And there's not only Deftones, like there's this lo-fi-ness about trying to get the Deftones sound with lo-fi that Ludacris thing had.
They nailed it.
I think Josh Scoggin is the greatest frontman of all time. And we got to just know him and watch him firsthand. And it was just, we were inspired by Deftones. We were also inspired by our label mates because we had freaking Ludacris, Norma Jean, Under Oath, Embodiment, Stavesacre, Zale, all these bands that we got to know, we became friends with. Holy crap. Just an amazing experience.
Yeah, real
cool. Yeah, you were just getting to absorb like so much great music, and how could you not be inspired by that, right?
Yeah, man.
Band that introduced us to a ton of amazing music that elevated.
Mention them. Yeah.
Project 86.
Oh, nice.
Them, man. Yeah. They showed us so many good bands that I would have never heard of. Bark Market. Handsome. Dude, that album, holy crap, changed my life.
Have you guys ever heard of Handsome?
No, this is really fun.
Handsome. Like, good luck.
Handsome.
Dude, listen to
Remember the Helmet, Quicksand. Dude,
they actually got to tour with one of the guys from Handsome too. And dude, listen to that. I think it's just self-titled. I think it's even hard to find on Spotify and stuff. But also, we're also watching this time where POD is signing to a major label. Then next is Project 86 signing to a major label. So our little underground thing starts feeling like it could be really big time. And then the first Project 86 album, if you've never heard Helmet, you've never heard those bands, which we hadn't. Well, Zach knew Helmet, but like I hadn't really understood Helmet riffs. So when I heard Project 86's sound, I had never heard anything like that before, ever, on that first record. And then Drawing Black Lines comes along, which was their major, split.
We actually just covered that on the show. I think it just came out last week.
Dude, that is one of the best albums Tooth and Nail has ever put out by far, is Project 86 Drawing Black Lines. And that one was like another game changer for us. And the way they did stuff was just so their own way. Randy was this beautiful singer that only sang on the hooks.
Yeah.
And Schwab found this way of doing what he does and making this song. Was it rapping or yelling or singing or whatever Schwab does? He was just a master at it. And again, these are friends of ours. These are the dudes we hung out at Waffle House with afterwards, and we're still really close with all these guys. And I don't know. It's like and again, we're 19, 20 years old now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like we're getting all of this stuff at this young age.
Pretty sure Project introduced me to Refused, if I'm remembering right.
Oh, wow.
Brandon Evil introduced me. I don't know if you were there.
Was it? Maybe
we were in Brandon Evil's office. He's like, "You've never heard Refused?" So he puts a CD in his like big tower CD thing in his office.
Shape of Punk to Come?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we hear tuku, 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 and the first time we've ever heard New Noise, get us cry, and whoa, and how arrogant and amazing
a
to call
moment.
that the shape of punk to come. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I love the
they are
audacity. They were
godfathers of
right,
everything
yeah.
that happens. Yeah,
Right.
man.
Sweet. Okay, so we do have to talk about new medicines. So I'm going to push us forward a little bit. So this is often my favorite part of the show. So Josh is our resident expert. He's our research guy, and he'll often give us a little bit of context about the album that we're going to cover. And it's always really fun for me when he does this with people that were directly involved, because this gives both of y'all an opportunity to call him out if he's wrong about anything.
Anything. Well, fortunately, Brandon has mentioned a couple things so far that have checked off and lined up with
Okay,
what I've
cool.
got so far, which is great because I had the originally from Dayton, Ohio, but I had the New Lebanon in there, but you confirmed that, which is great.
Yeah, you got to add a little redneck to it, though. It's Lebanon.
Lebanon.
You can
Gotcha.
even say
Okay.
Lebanon if you wanted to, but Lebanon is down
I like
towards
that.
Cincinnati. So we're New Lebanon.
Okay, that's
Okay.
It's really
fair.
just Lebanon. Yeah, New Lebanon.
New Lebanon, Ohio. All right, perfect.
Yep.
Members, we already have two of them here, so it's pretty easy. I'm not going to mess those guys up. Brandon Miles
What are their
and
names?
Zachary Rike, I think. No.
Oh,
Brandon
yeah, there you
and
go.
Zach are here. And then Todd Osborne was also on guitar as well for this record, correct?
Yes, he joined the band right before New Medicine. Yes.
Sweet.
Cool.
He was not on Four Wall Blackmail. Yeah.
Yep. And you got Chad and Josh, which is cool that you got like a brothers, like a Thrice or the National situation where you got brothers playing bass and drums. That's always fun. So we're talking about New Medicines for its 20th anniversary, which is exciting. It was released on April 6th of 2004. It was y'all's second LP on Tooth and Nail Records, and this is always exciting for us on the show. But it was produced by Aaron Sprinkle, mixed by Jared
Friend of the
McNeely. Aaron Sprinkle, friend of the show, mixed by Jared McNeely, and mastered by Troy Glessner, friend of the show.
Other friend of the
complete
show.
Trinity.
The Tooth and Nail Trinity that we like to
Tooth
call
and Nail
out
Trinity.
for the Tooth and Nail sound back in the day.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I really want to talk about is the artwork is really cool on this one. The CD has, it's like where the sticker
here's Josh
is.
with his physical media.
Yeah, but it works because this is Brandon's job, so I'm sure
For
he
sure.
wants to talk
Yeah.
about, like, he's all into the art, which is great.
But I did not do this. This is all the Clark brothers.
Right. This is all Ryan, but it's super cool, especially having like the sticker on there and then the slide out case. So it's very cool. When did you start doing, because you didn't do any of the Dead Poetic stuff, Brandon, when did you kind of, like, when did you do some of your first stuff? I remember seeing, I saw you did the Project 86 this time of year EP, which was like 08.
Yeah, that would have been one of the first things for sure.
Okay.
I started doing, I mean, I've always been into art my whole life. And when it was time to do logos and covers and all that stuff, I did all of that stuff for us when we were coming up. And then we didn't really start selling merch until Dead Poetic. So, but that was some really simple merch designs I did back then. And then I would just start doing merch for all the other bands. You know, I mentioned all these bands in town that we were able to tour with, and I would just start doing merch for all of them. But merch was, since we were touring, merch was so quick. I could just do the design and be done with it and you know, sell it or whatever. I didn't charge hardly anything for those designs back then. But that was like early days was Under Oath and He Is Legend and Beloved and, you know, all of those bands we would tour with and I would design merch for. But the layout was just such a overwhelming thing for me back then. And the reality of doing a layout is you've got to like really nitpick on, you got to talk to printers in Germany and get everything perfectly right. And you got to change the liner notes and fix those lyrics and all this stuff that would take like constant care. I'm on tour with a little power book. I can't like do that sort of thing. So merch just kind of became my thing. But around that time, like Don and Ryan Clark, they had done so much of the album layouts that it was more like an honor for my band to be able to have something designed by Don and Ryan Clark.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So that was way more exciting to me. And I just didn't think I was good enough yet to design our layout. And looking back, I wasn't good enough yet. And I didn't even touch, you know, layouts until maybe the mid 2000s. I did stuff for Project and Josh Moore and just a few things here and there, but I really didn't want to do layouts for the longest time. And honestly, I didn't even start doing layouts until I don't know, the mid 20 teens around. Well, I guess 2015 was when I started doing layouts. That 21 Pilots Blurry Face, the first time I did layout. So
A good start.
That was your first layout?
yeah, that was the first real layout.
No
Yeah.
big deal.
That record got
Jump
big.
right in, buddy.
Nothing.
Jump right in.
But yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I still did a lot of things I didn't know, but that whole experience was a major career changer for me.
And that one has like the thing where you pull it out the side and like the circles.
Yeah.
It's not a light undertaking for your first layout. So,
I wouldn't, looking back on this, there's a little influence, you know what I mean? Like I do see a lot of similarities between this. I don't think I did it on purpose, but when I look back on this, back in the Blurry Face days, Tyler was like, dude, let's do red and black. Let's do red and black. And like our whole shtick for the New Medicines touring cycle was red and black, and
Right.
so it was like I'd been here before, but anyway.
I have to imagine you got all kinds of inspiration from tours, seeing the merch and art and all that.
Yeah, from tours, but from the freaking Clark brothers. Like to have your design idols be friends and to be able to, and I'm sure you guys know this, but Tooth and Nail Records, Asterisk Studio, their company, it's the art department for Tooth and Nail Records. They're right there. So when you would, and actually it was like, what's Asterisk Studio and what is the Clark brothers and blah, blah, blah. It was kind of blurred, but I had direct access to my design heroes. And so when we got to go up to Seattle to hang out at the label, it was just like, I'm just getting to go in there and just like hang out and see the way they do stuff. And they were so generous. Give me a CD full of fonts, give me all these Xerox of all these clip art books they had.
Hell yeah.
They were just so generous with everything. And like, I owe so much of my design career to them. So yeah, it was way more of an excitement for me to have them design this.
Oh yeah.
Than any pride will want me to do it. Yeah.
Okay. So before we go track by track through the album, I have to talk to my two other hosts on this show because I know that New Medicines is a big record for both of y'all. And I want to maybe speak to that a little bit. How do you feel talking about your experience with this record with two of the people that made the record? Are y'all cool with that? Let's do it. Come on.
Pretty cool, man. Pretty
All
cool.
right.
TJ, I think you should lead us off.
I think so. Because
I can.
TJ, you've brought this record up multiple times in the run of this show.
Yes. It's interesting actually hearing Brandon and Zach, hearing y'all talk about your influences and how like the punk bands and all that, Weezer, infinite amounts of references that y'all have dropped that I will be digging into for weeks that I wasn't aware of. It's interesting hearing y'all talk about that. For me, I feel like it is one of those situations where you are like a Weezer in a sense for me, right? and I'm thinking about you and your peers, or who I perceive as or perceived as your peers, folks like Under Oath, As Cities Burn, Emery. I know a lot of those people and kind of traveled in similar circles. And those were big bands for me coming up. And you guys with New Medicines are no exception. So wildly, I didn't know what your sound was before that album. That was kind of when I got turned on to y'all as a band, but it was such a huge album that it stuck with me and became pretty influential in a couple bands that I was in college and just after college. I would say took a lot of pages from y'all's book in a way. Yeah, it's just hard. It's hard to say too much about it without getting off in the weeds and a little overly tangential and overly philosophical, but
Go for it, dude.
To say,
we never have a chance to do this. I mean, quick tangent. I heard someone describe the album as serious, and just that adjective was just I never heard that before, but you're right. Yeah. It was serious. Yeah. And
absolutely.
It's refreshing to hear other people's perspective of it because, not only were we just from a small town, we locked ourselves in a studio in Seattle, Washington for a month. And this is the record that we did. So we never get to hear how it resonated because we were just touring it and we were busy. You know, we didn't get to smell the roses really.
Well, and you can only perceive your work through your own lens, right? Until you have the opportunity to have it sort of mirrored back to you as other people have perceived it. And so I imagine that is an interesting experience. But I'll say this, like, I would agree with Sirius. I think it also just feels very emotionally palpable. Like there's so much kind of like, not to get overly graphic, but like bleeding through the sonics and the lyrics of this album. And you know, not to kind of play my hand too early, but that resonated with me. I don't know if y'all are Enneagram people. Don't worry, I'm not going to get off in the weeds too much, Kylan and Josh. But as a little Enneagram 4, which is like the artist, the kind of sad, melancholic kiddo that I was, I think I really clung to this album because it engaged with some thoughts and feelings that maybe my family or folks around me weren't willing to go to. They wouldn't engage with those things. And here y'all were doing it unabashedly. Things like pain and grief and confusion around loss and, just really, really heavy stuff. And I think I really appreciated that you were doing it artistically with a lot of raw emotional energy, but emotional intelligence in an articulate way. So yeah, it landed with me for a lot of reasons, but I'll stop there so that we still have things for me to say later.
I will say when I listen back, it has this amazing way of conveying sadness and despair in an aggressive way. Like it's like angry sadness or something, which was
and
accurate.
Thoughtful too. Like I think it had a lot to say in a way that, plenty of other albums out there at that time that might have been trying to hit on that same thing might present that emotional energy in the sonics, but maybe not in the lyrical category in a way that this album to me did. It landed right.
Well,
so,
if you want me to respond to that, do you, or do you want to, but
no, please.
Sure. The sadness, the sadness was authentic. Like even when you're talking about this, it makes me sad because we had, like I said, we had this small town, and when we were 13, Zach's girlfriend's big brother died in a car accident. And he was with a girl who would later become my girlfriend's older brother. He died in a car accident. So those were a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old died in a car accident in our little town. And that was earth-shattering, tragic for us. So we went back to school the day after, and it's this, it's just something I can't explain. It's just this sadness pours over everything. And then it happened again. And then we had a friend, Ryan Strassheim, who got in a car accident. And our other friend, John, who was in the car with him, had a freaking metal plate in his head after that accident. Then a friend, Garrett, and then and then another friend, Joe, went off the highway too fast and he died in a car accident. Like, we're not even sophomores, and like 4 or 5. And the fact that I even have to say 4 or 5, and I don't know exactly because there was so much of it, like 4 or 5 of our friends had died by the time and again, remember, there's only 70, 80 kids in a grade. So we know everybody anyway.
Yeah.
And like,
real tight
I have
community.
a relationship with Timmy. I had a relationship with Garrett, had a relationship with Joe. Like, and it keeps going. And like, I think I could count to 13 people, 13, maybe a year or two after we had graduated high school. A girl OD'd. And then one of our really close friends, really, really tight knit. And then our best friend's older brother, they were in a car together driving home, and they went off the side of the road, went into these trees, and we showed up the next day, and these trees were covered in windshield. And that's where the song Glass in the Trees comes from. But that song is about a friend of ours who was like the silliest, funniest, weirdest dude. And he brought nothing but joy to our lives. And I think we were 19 at the time, and he died at 19 years old. And then I think the guy I was with, our other best friend's older brother, was probably 20 or 19 at the time. And dude, it's it is way too much for us to go through before the age of 20.
Yeah.
And we had
for
experienced it by the time we're 20, we experienced 6, 7, however many times it was. I don't want to write the list, but like I said, the list gets to like 13. When I think about our faith, it's weird because like Christianity was presented to us at a time where it did feel like life or death. Like it actually felt like we could die at any moment because Timmy just died or because Garrett just died. That feeling certainly motivated this idea of salvation. It's kind of like making sure you had all your boxes checked just in case you died, and just in case there is an afterlife, and that's why it was serious. And that's why I didn't, we certainly had our cheesy, narrow-minded moments with Christianity, but I will say there was something very wholesome and very life or death about it for us back then, which is why when I heard that Zao album for the first time and heard that screaming, that sounded like the confusion that we were going through. You wanted to scream. You wanted to, like, the idea of God and death and heaven and afterlife sounded like a scream to me. It didn't sound like a praise and worship song. So whatever those praise and worship bands,
right?
Yeah,
they're like,
it wasn't about expressing joy to the Lord or anything, man. It was just like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
God help me, whatever it was. So there was some grit to the Christianity that was wrapped up in Dead Poetic, and there was some deep sadness. And I think there was a lot of anger for me, not at God necessarily. I don't know that I've ever really been angry at God, but angry at whatever nonsense that this church was creating around God. And most of the lyrical content on New Medicines, and really all Dead Poetic for that matter, is this frustration with this sales pitch of Jesus the churches were selling me in, because it was just like, that's not my interpretation of this. You're talking about like rainbows and butterflies. I just went to my best friend's funeral, So that's why I think Dead Poetic was serious. Unknowingly, unwittingly, that's the way we wrote. And those minor chords here and there were just there. And, I can listen, like that album, when I would listen to it on headphones all the way through, it would put me to sleep in a very eerie, sad way. But it was also really intense in a really accurate way. I don't know that I knew that, until like a few years ago when I started connecting the dots and realizing why it was sad.
That's something that's so fascinating to me about a lot of the albums that we cover on this podcast is like, okay, so many of these records, when we first listened to them, there's a vague sense as a consumer of the art of like, okay, there's something really important here. And then as someone that has consistently created art since then, I also get the sense of like, as the person creating it, there's a vague sense of importance here. And then it's only like once you get into like your 30s, 40s, like as you start to get older, that some of that stuff makes even more sense than it did when you were just like 21. Mm-hmm. And it was just like more of a vibe at that time of like I'm trying to express something. I don't fully know what that is, but it's
and the time that passes helps you unpack it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So Josh, I want to hear about your connection to this record before we get into it.
Sweet. Yeah. I got into this record pretty late, actually. I heard New Medicines on a Tooth and Nail comp in like 2004, 2005. So I had heard that song, but then I don't know why I never like dove into them more. And it was like same like As Cities Burn situation. It was like heard the one song and like, oh, whatever. Got this record and Vices in college and like started listening to them and diving into them a lot. And they were always like really like records I really enjoyed. But this was a fun one because like a couple years ago, right pretty soon into the pandemic, there was like a time where this record like came back and like I just would like throw it on whenever I like had to go to Costco and or like don't know what's going to happen? Like, is there going to be food on the shelves, or is there going to be stuff?
Right.
But this was like the record that I would like.
Time.
Yeah. So it was like oddly comforting in that time. And that's when I feel like I really like developed like a really big connection to it.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
And it's one of those ones I wish I could go back and give my like high school stuff, like along with like artists like, or like albums like Artists in the Ambulance, and like ones that I didn't get into till later that have been like, man, go back in time and like give myself like 5 hours.
Right.
Like, you'll love these.
Right.
You'll thank me later,
Right.
kind of thing. But as like you were talking about, if you don't know, if like you don't get to hear, because you made this in the studio, and then like kind of like the band was kind of over after that. But this is one of the ones like of Tooth and Nail, I think is like a super like, I'm going to talk about Beloved as well, but it's like in a very beloved record, along with like that beloved record, like the Everglow. Like it's in, I think that those canon of records
spot.
that people, that people like
that
are like
S tier.
Yeah, like that really cherish and that stand out within the Tooth and Nail catalog. So if y'all don't know that, I think that's how I view it, and I think that's how many others view this record as well, as part of that echelon of records.
Thanks, man. It was a prime time for Tooth and Nail. We got it. You don't know that you're on the wave, but we were on the wave. You know, it was, everything was. Yeah. You know, and Aaron hadn't done a ton at that point. You know, I feel like Amberlynn and us and Demon Hunter, and there just wasn't that much. But man, it was a good mix. We hit it at the right time. Sometimes you hit stuff at the right time.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, here's the deal. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to dive right in, and we're going to actually talk about New Medicines, track by track.